You make your own luck. I think in terms of being a musician, to at least a degree, it means kind of learning how to be in the right place at the right time. And keep your eyes and ears open for the opportunities.
Chuck, thanks so much. My gosh, we go back years ago performing. You inspired me when you played, you sang. There was always this happiness that you had, the spirit of joy that you bring to every note you play. Thanks for joining us here.
Dude, I cannot believe I'm sitting in a room right across from Dom Famularo. It's so great to see you again. It's been a long time. And
it really has.
I admire what you're doing so much. I think this is such a great series, and thank you for doing it. And it's just a joy and a pleasure to be with you, my friend.
Thank you so much,
Great,
Chuck.
man.
You know, the Stones, you've been with them for years. They were playing because of the storm that's coming into Miami now.
Yes.
Only the Stones could shift the date from a Saturday night to a Friday night and still pack the place with the energy and the excitement. People that were there last night already told me that it was an incredible concert. Still doing it strong, you guys at 110%.
Dude, I don't know what it is about the Rolling Stones and hurricanes, but you know, we were scheduled to play Jazz Fest. We had to cancel that, and then we rearranged it to play the Superdome in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And what happens? A big storm comes, and we had to, and the promoter is a good friend of mine, Quint Davis. He runs the Jazz Fest, you know Quint.
Jazz Fest,
so Quint says, I have to be the only promoter in the world that gets rained out in an indoor facility. And then, you know, then the hurricanes come in here, and we had to shift it to yesterday. But you're right. I was really thinking, wow, we're going to go in there, and there might be 3/4 of a stadium. And I was told that something like 2,000 tickets were the only sacrifice.
Which was nothing. I mean,
out of 45,000. So.
Jam-packed, the energy was there, the excitement, the people came in, the dedication of just the fans is absolutely amazing.
And it was a fitting last show, I must say, for the tour. It's been a fantastic tour, 17 shows in 15 cities, and you know, everybody happy, healthy, thank you. And having a great time.
Beautiful, but you continue. So tell me about how music, where you were born and when you came out, what music was around you, how'd you get inspired to play music?
My first influence was my mom. I was the baby of 3 children. My brother 14 years my elder, my sister 5 years my elder. Mom played the piano. She was not a professional, not a teacher, but she played. And we had a little spinet piano in the house. Being the baby of the family, we were together quite often, you know, with brother and sister out in school. And so when I'm 5, 6 years old, Dad out working, I'd tug on the skirt, Mama, play me something. And she'd play, and Dom, I was just fascinated. You know, look at those hands moving up and down the keyboard, listen to the melodies and the rhythms and the harmonies. And she'd get me up on the stool and say, well, Chuck, here's a little triad. You can play around with that, you know, and here's a little melody, play around with that. And I got to go do my work, you know, my housework, and you just sit up here. So it was kind of a form of babysitting, really.
Yeah.
You know, she kept me busy sitting there. And you know what? One of the things that she did that I am so grateful for, and I know you'll appreciate this, is she would say things like, Chuck, what do you think it would sound like if there was a big storm outside? I'd rumble down on the low end and do some lightning strikes up here, you know. Chuck, what do you think it might sound like if you hit a home run in your baseball team? What would it sound like if you got mad with your friends? You know, so it's always been
that creative
emotion,
input, wow.
And the first thing I think of in music is colors, feelings, emotions, and not notes and chords, you know.
Beautiful, beautiful. But what a great lesson to plant in a young child.
Yeah.
Did you start taking lessons at that point?
Well, I learned by, you know, just sitting there at the instrument and sorting things out, basically. And then at one point, the parents said, well, the boy's showing a little promise here, you know, Chuck, would you like to have lessons? And I think I was 7 at the time. And I said, well, okay. And what I found was that my ears and abilities were way ahead of my eyes, and so trying to read that music was a bit of a challenge for me. And I tried it for, I think it was 6 months, and then finally I said, you know, I think I'd rather be playing ball or being with my friends. But I would always go back, gravitate back to that piano and just kind of experiment. A little later, my cousin, who was maybe a couple of years older than me, was playing the guitar. taught me some things on the guitar, and at that era, it was a lot about folk music. You know, you had Dylan, Chad and Jeremy, you had the New Christie Minstrels, Kenny Rogers, and what was that, the first edition?
The first edition,
And there was a television program, I know you'll remember, Hootenanny.
Hootenanny,
You remember?
absolutely, yeah.
And so, you know, a Kingston Trio.
The Kingston Trio, they all performed there, absolutely, yeah.
And that was a big deal. So we were folkies, you know, we played all that stuff. But I kept going back to the piano. So once rock and roll came into the picture, and you had, you know, the Beatles and Stones and Zombies and Dave Clark 5 and the British Invasion, that shifted everything from folk to rock and roll.
Yeah.
But the other thing, growing up in Alabama, was the indigenous Southern music. You know, you had what was going on in Muscle Shoals.
Muscle Shoals was great music.
You know, a hotbed of activity, and those guys could play. You know, and so you had, you know, Wilson Pickett, Aretha Franklin, and all of these people going to Muscle Shoals, including the Stones, and Dylan. All of those things converged in my life, and then the other thing was country music, you know, and gospel. You heard gospel, black and white, on the radio on Sunday, and you know, there was that vibe, especially for the black gospel, that you would hear, and that kind of translated over into rock and roll, as you know.
Absolutely.
Matter of fact, I got in mind a project to do that would be the gospel according to Chuck, which would be a gospel record, not so much from the, you know, religious aspect, but to show how gospel piano has influenced rock and roll. Little Richard,
absolutely.
You know, Jerry Lee Lewis.
Yeah. Boy, that would be a great educational tool too, to understand the movement of how that changed, and how still to this day, keyboard players are still influenced by that.
Absolutely. When I was coming up and finally got into it, who was I listening to? Well, other than Jerry Lee and Little Richard, which goes back, Leon Russell, Elton John, who was influenced by gospel as well. So,
boy, that was some great music. So now, did you start playing with musicians at that time? Were you meeting local players?
By the age of 14, we formed our first band. It was called the Misfits, M-I-S-F-I-T-Z. Got to be cool.
Yeah.
And we were a good little band. The bass player was the son of the professor of music at the University of Alabama. Drummer was really good. We had a couple of different guitar players. The second one we had was quite a good player. And so we got a steady job playing the YMCA every Friday night.
Fantastic.
There was another band that played on Saturday nights for the older kids, but we had kind of the younger crowd, you know, the 13, 14. And then the other one was the 16s, you know. So the Misfits had a steady job at the Y every Friday night, and then the first television station came to Tuscaloosa, WCFT, and they wanted to emulate American Bandstand. They came up with a really clever name, Tuscaloosa Bandstand. And they hired us. And there was a local DJ, a guy named Tiger Jack Garrett, that was on the radio that everybody loved, and he was really a good DJ. And he was the MC for this television thing, and so Saturday morning, there we go. And Dom, it was an enterprise. We got paid $50 between four guys for the YMCA, $100 between the four guys for the television program. So, you know, it became an enterprise, and I'm like, wow.
So you're seeing how you can make money now with this
14,
music.
15 years old, saying, this can work, you know?
So from there, you guys kept on playing. Did it grow from that point?
Yeah, you know, eventually that band broke up, and by then, you know, the skills were beginning to develop, and so my next thought was, where's the other guys that I need to be playing with? You know, where's the other really good players? And fortunately, in Tuscaloosa, there was a lot of really talented musicians, so I wound up with this group and that group, and eventually we had a band called the South Camp. You have to remember this was around the Summer of Love, and so we were playing outdoors in the quadrangle at the University of Alabama for the hippies, and we were hippies too. I did skip over one other important thing, and that was there was a period of time, there is still a black college in Tuscaloosa called Stillman College, and there was a really talented group called the Jades that were working, you know, that had formed a group. And they were kind of like a Temps Tops, you know, Temptations, Four Tops thing. They were dancing, they had all the moves, great harmonies, you know. They had a keyboard player, a guy named Freddie, I can't remember Freddie's last name, but Freddie wanted to be out dancing, see. And we got to know each other, and he said, Chuck, you know, I think I can show you some things that you can learn, and I can go out there and be, you know, with the guys. Yeah, man. So I think I was probably 16 at this time, and of course, it was the South, and there were, you know, tensions going on, but I wanted to play with whoever was the best players, and they were one of the best in town, no doubt about it. Got some flack from some of the community at the time that you know, had segregation feelings about it, and that was a challenge, you know, but stuck with it and learned a lot from Freddie and from working with the Jades. And eventually I did wind up going up to Muscle Shoals and to Birmingham a little bit. Birmingham had a couple of studios.
Yeah, Birmingham always has had great music energy.
So as I was developing as a musician and seeking opportunities, went up to Shoals, wound up on a record by a guy named Freddie North, who was a black R&B artist, and the song was called Don't Take Her, She's All I've Got. I played Hammond B3 on it, got paid something like $25, and it was a gold record. It was a hit, you know. But that was another incentive. You know, wow, man, you know, first of all, I'm on a record.
I'm on a record.
Dom, you know, these days in the digital age, everybody can be on a record.
Right.
But back in those days, you know how
it was magic.
If you could be on that thing and hold it up, and, I'm on this, oh man, and hear it on the radio, you know, oh, fantastic. So that's kind of what started snowballing in my life back in that day. Now, you know, you're taking me up to about the age of 17. I think it was when I was on the Freddie North thing. Okay, so where are my opportunities? And certainly Muscle Shoals was one of those places. However, there were such more experienced and older players in place up there. You know, you had Barry Beckett, great piano player. You had, of course, the Swampers, Roger Hawkins.
Absolutely.
Wasn't he a great drummer? And
Roger's
David Hood on bass, and there was a number of different guitar players. You had Pete Carr, you had Jimmy Johnson, eventually Dwayne Allman.
These are the guys that were really kind of creating the music at that time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was the thing. Clayton Ivey was another great piano player from up there. But I realized, wow, they're going to get the first call. And I'm going to be second or third string here for a while. And I thought, well, you know, okay, but what else is there? And I heard about Capricorn Records in Macon, Georgia. And I had a contact there. And so at age 17, I got in my Oldsmobile Cutlass, 65 Cutlass station wagon, and drove to Macon, Georgia, and to meet, you know, this contact that I had. And they gave me a tour of the record company, the offices, a tour of the state-of-the-art studio. They had a booking agency that introduced, everybody was really nice, and they were looking for help. You know, they said, you know what, if you come over here, we'll find you something to do, just come on.
How amazing.
And so I moved over in earnest when I was 17, on the backside of 17, going into 18, and started working up the ladder.
So step by step, you had this level of perseverance that your passion drove you to just keep on going straight.
Go for it, dude. You know, let's do everything we can to you know, make a living out of this. And here's the thing, I was in the senior year of high school, and I had transferred up to Birmingham from Tuscaloosa because there was a studio there in Birmingham, and back in that day they had a situation called DE, Diversified Education. And what that was for kids that were either juniors or seniors that had a job. So it was mostly a mechanic or somebody working in an office or whatever. Well, I had a job working in the studio, and I couldn't believe I convinced the principal that this was okay. And in addition to working in the studio, we had a band, and we were traveling a bit. We'd go to mostly college circuits, you know, so Auburn, Alabama, Jackson, Mississippi, Oxford, Mississippi, Knoxville.
Yeah.
And we'd get these gigs, and sometimes we'd get a club somewhere. So I would miss maybe a Friday and a Monday of school,
yeah.
during my senior year, and got called in midway in the senior year. Grades were not great, but I was a B- student. And the principal says, your grades are okay, Chuck, but there's a law in this state that says you have to attend so many days to graduate, and you're right on the edge now. And I was halfway through senior year. It was a bit of pressure. My parents were concerned, obviously. They wanted me to stay in school, but I was making money and I was getting work. Yeah. And so I said, well, I'm just going to try staying this path and in music, and if it doesn't work out in 6 months, I'll go back and finish and do something else. But it kept working out.
So you made the attendance?
Well, I had to drop out of school. I had to drop out because I wanted to keep playing. And I could see that during the course of the second half of the school year that I was going to miss another, 10 days probably.
Absolutely, yeah.
To do this work. So I gave it up, and that was about the time that I moved to Macon and started making my way through that system.
Yeah.
And I started getting session work. We had a band that got signed to Ampex Records. We were only one of 2 bands that were ever on the Ampex label. As you know, and some of the folks out there may not know, that Ampex made the magnetic tape.
Yeah.
They were one of the companies that made magnetic tape for the recording back in that day. And so they said, well, let's get into the record game, not just make the magnetic tape, but see if we can start a label. And they faltered. We did 1 record, and that was it. The company fell apart, and so did the band. But that's when I started getting more and more calls for recording work, for session work in Macon. And we had a lot of artists that were floating through. And the big break came, I'll back up and say there was a couple of years I spent with a guy named Alex Taylor. Alex was James Taylor's elder brother, and he was signed to Capricorn. He did 2 records, one of which I was on, the second record called Dinner Time. And we were touring, and Capricorn was experiencing success. The Allman Brothers started selling records. Yeah. So we went out on tour with Alex. We were playing mostly clubs, or we might open up occasionally for the Allmans or for some other band. But we were a working band. We were working, probably doing 5 shows a week.
How beautiful.
Traveling. That was my first experience traveling around the country. I'll never forget the first place I went that was out of the South was Toledo, Ohio. And so we're on tour, we're playing some funky club, and I'm writing postcards to my mom and dad, Holy Toledo. But this was one thing my father always said, and I never forgot this. Traveling is an education in itself. I was getting that kind of education during those years. And at this point, I'm like 18 years old, and we're traveling in around the country. Yeah. We had a Ford LTD station wagon, and we had, 6 people in that thing, so we were huddled up. But, it was magic. It was so magic. It was great, and we were playing and having a good time. And
traveling and evolving with the band and growing with the band and experiencing, again, traveling is the best educator. Here you are now visiting different areas that were completely out of probably the area that you were even familiar with. Yeah. You're meeting new people, you're playing at these different clubs, all those experiences are coming in. So even though you left school, your education level rose to a much higher level.
You are correct, and I don't have any regrets about it. It was the right path for me. It's not the right path for everyone, is it? Everyone has to find their own place and follow their own heart and their own passion. But it was a passion, just like it is for you. One other thing I was talking about my dad, old sayings were a big deal in the house. Mom would say, "Stitching time saves 9," and Dad would say, there's an art to everything. And one of the sayings that always stuck around in my head and heart is that you make your own luck. What does that mean? I think in terms of being a musician, to at least a degree, it means kind of learning how to be in the right place at the right time. And keep your eyes and ears open for the opportunities.
Yeah, yeah.
Make friends, ask questions.
Yeah, yeah.
Listen.
Yeah, yeah.
And learn.
But you seem to have done that so well because you have led a path of great opportunities that kept on coming up and continue.
Well, it's been a story in my case of one thing leads to another.
Yeah.
The big break for me after the Alex Taylor years, I worked for a time with Dr. John.
Great musician.
Mac Rebenak, he was just a genius.
Yeah.
And God rest his soul, he just passed in the last few months.
Yeah, yeah.
After Mac, the Allman Brothers band, who were finally getting really popular and who was really providing a lot of inspiration for the rest of the musicians that were in Macon and connected to the record company, to Capricorn. Dwayne Allman has this tragic accident, right, on his motorcycle and is killed. Brilliant musician at age, God, I think he was 24.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. And he had been on all these great records with Aretha and Wilson Pickett and, all these hits. And Layla, with Eric Clapton and Derek and the Dominoes.
Sure.
So he was a figurehead, not only for the Allman Brothers, but for all of us that were in Macon on the label. He has this tragic accident. The band has to pick up the pieces. They had some obligations to do a little tour, and they went out as a 5-piece band with no replacement because you just don't replace Dwayne Allman.
Period.
And so Dickie Betts had to step up to the plate. He had never even tried to play slide at the time, and as you know, slide guitar was Dwayne's forte.
That was his thing, yeah.
That was his thing. Yeah. So Dickie has to step up, and he did a really admirable job. Finally, they finished that little tour, and they come back to Macon, and they're mentally exhausted, physically exhausted. They've lost the leader, and they're taking a break. And Greg he was quite a prolific songwriter at the time, and he had these songs that didn't really fit the Allman Brothers band. So he says, I really want to do a solo record. I had befriended the producer named Johnny Sandlin, wonderful guy, and very talented. And Johnny had hired me for several recordings at the time and said, Greg's going to do a solo record. Would you like to be on that? Yes, I would. Thank you very much. The record was called Laid Back, and it was a different set of musicians outside the Allman Brothers, really good players, great experience. And I think it helped to heal Greg a little bit, to do something different outside the Allman Brothers band. But here's the thing, during the course of making that record, which was really going well, all of us enjoying it, there were these jam sessions where the rest of the Allman Brothers would come down after hours and, hey, pick a key and let's go. And so there was all this experimentation and we may throw in a song that they normally do on their set or that they had done on the record or whatever. But these jam sessions began to really develop and sound good. So 3-4 weeks into it, I get a call from their manager, Phil Walden, who also owned the record label. I'd like to see you in my office. And I'm 20 years old and I'm thinking, did I screw up, Is it gonna send me back to Alabama or what's gonna happen here? And I go in, okay, so I go in the office and there's all the band members, around the room. A few pleasantries go down and then the shoe drops. The guys feel like this is really an interesting direction with you. Would you like to be in the Allman Brothers band?
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So that perseverance and all those experiences that you had and all that belief that this was going to be it for you, at that moment, the culmination was huge.
It was huge. I mean, it was like landing on the moon, right? It was such a big leap. Before that, it had been, Alex Taylor, Dr. John, and things were moving like this in steps, but this was... And they were such a good band, I mean, Greg's voice, and he was a fantastic Hammond B3 player.
Classic,
And Dickie, a great songwriter and guitar player. The two drummers, J-Mo and Butch Trucks together.
Fantastic combination, I mean, really.
And Dom, you know this, but maybe to enlighten some of the folks out there about the two drummer thing. The way it worked was, Butch had that steady thing. He was a solid, steady drummer, and he had a great feel and a great beat. J-Mo was a jazz drummer.
Yeah.
So he's flying all around, you know, and Butch has got that steady. It just made this fantastic thing.
Yeah.
So there you go. We immediately after the Laid Back record, we started recording the album Brothers and Sisters.
Beautiful.
And that had the song Ramblin' Man, which was almost #1. I think it was a #2 single. And the record actually did, Brothers and Sisters album got to be #1 on the charts and stayed there for a few weeks, several weeks, almost a month or maybe even longer. The instrumental Jessica, which had a nice space for a piano player.
Yeah, classic tune, man. Yeah.
And
really.
and there were others. There was a great blues called Jelly Jelly on there that gave me a nice spot. And Come and Go Blues was another song on the record that made the charts.
So you were able to open up a little bit more, and you were having some freedom with the band.
Exactly. You know, I had room to play. They were looking for that.
Yeah.
You know, that's what they expected of me.
Yeah.
And you know this as a musician, when we're recording or we're learning a song for the first time, you know, my approach is, what does this song want?
Yeah.
You know, what is it asking me to do?
Right.
What is the artist asking me to do? What is the producer asking me to do? Do I need to step up to the plate and you know, put some frills in there, or do I need to lay back and just do some color? Do I need to, you know, concentrate more on what's happening with the rhythm section and complement that? So in this case, it was, hey, step out. You know, certain songs. There were certain songs where that wasn't the case, but that was a big opportunity for me in that regard, because it gave me, you know, a boost. Hey, feel free to go for it, man. You know.
Well, what freedom, and you know, you always, in all the years that I've heard you playing, you always serve the song. You always play exactly what is needed at that moment, at that time. And sometimes certain gigs might change. You might alter something differently, so you're so aware of the moment of that time of what's going on. That's a real skill in itself, Chuck.
Well, thank you for that. And you know, all these years I've been with the Stones, let's face it, it's not that kind of gig where the piano, you know, gets to constantly have a lot of solos and all of that. That's okay, right? You know,
absolutely.
As a musician, it's find the role, find the position.
Absolutely, serve that song for what it needs, for what it is. And again, even with the Stones now, you're serving the song. It's reaching thousands and millions of people that are inspiring them at a certain level. So the part that you're playing really is what is needed for the higher purpose.
Well, that's it. That's the goal. You know, there are some songs with the Stones that I get a flash there, like "She's a Rainbow" was a great piano. I'm doing my best Nicky Hopkins on that. Nicky, what a great player he was. He was on a lot of those Stones records, early records. Spend the Night Together, it's got a nice piano part. You know, there's places I get to step up a little bit, but it's not like it was with the Allmans, where that was a more upfront role. But you know, Dom, what's kind of happened with me in the role with the Stones, back in 1989, the band did the Steel Wheels tour. Now, I joined the band in '82, and that was the last time the band had toured. So you're talking about a 7-year gap with no live performances. I did a couple of records with them after that '82 tour, but there had been no touring for 7 years.
Interesting.
Now, in '82, when I joined the band, the set list was the same every show. Now, in '89, we have a new record. Actually, 3 records since the '82
At that time, yeah.
And so, and it wasn't just me, but I did bring up the point, guys, you know, last time we did this, same set every night. You got an incredible body of work. Let's explore that. Come on, let's have a rehearsal and go through all this stuff and see what we can bring to the people and have options and not just do the same thing every night. So we had this fantastic rehearsal period of about 6 weeks, all sequestered in I think it was a girls' school that we took over and had everything set up, and worked every day. You know, hardly took a weekend off actually, but occasionally had a day off. But here's the point: I started making notes on all of these songs that we would explore and do, and so I'd make, you know, handwritten charts. Did we have horns on this one? What were the horn parts? Were there background vocals? Did I sing? What were the other singers doing? Did we change the arrangement for any reason? Sometimes we did. If the song was particularly long, we wanted to eliminate a verse or a chorus. So I started these charts and started keeping them in a little plastic sheet. And the guy that was working as my technician at the time was really great, and he was helping me to compile this stuff. So from '89 up to today, I've amassed these 2 encyclopedic
Excellent.
notebooks
Excellent.
of all these rehearsals,
Excellent.
even sound checks if we make,
Excellent.
And so my role has become kind of musical director. Hey, Chuck, what's the middle 8 on that one? I can't remember. What key is it in? I mean, the body of work, again, is so incredible. It's not surprising that they can't remember all the arrangements. I can't remember all of them. I have to go back and refer to that notebook sometimes. But that's what's developed for me personally in my role with the Rolling Stones.
But that's amazing, because your level of discipline, and you've always been this way, your level of discipline is at such a high level that you had that perception that needed to be done, and you took the responsibility and did it.
Yeah. Well, that's true. I did see the need.
Yeah.
Instead of just kind of flighty going through these rehearsals and misremembering when the next time you do the song. Well, wait a minute. Here's what we did, guys.
Yeah.
So that's been a very enjoyable part of my role with the band.
It's amazing, because with the Allman Brothers and of course the Stones, I mean, you have had this you've been in the thick of this for so many years at such a high level and here you're still enthusiastic about trying to find even a higher level of what you can pull out of it.
Well, you're the same way, my friend, and it's the passion, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what drives you, is the love of doing what you're doing and wanting to constantly make it better.
Absolutely. What motivates you? How every day with you're such a positive person, you're on top of your music, you're listening to all this music. What motivates you? What drives you?
The opportunity to do this, it's a blessing, man. It is a true blessing to have these opportunities to play with all these different artists. And what I was saying earlier about, in my case, one thing leads to another.
Yeah.
On the '89 Steel Wheels tour, Eric Clapton was a special guest on several of the shows.
Yeah.
Fortunately for me, they set him up right next to me on stage physically. And we were doing the song Little Red Rooster, great old blues song.
Yeah.
And of course, Eric is the greatest blues player in the world. We were having kind of a nice little, I didn't try to, step out too much, but I tried to have a little dialogue, musical dialogue with Eric. So I get home from that tour, and this was before digital technology, and the answering machines were on cassette. And there's a voicemail from Eric Clapton saying, "Hi, it's Eric Clapton calling from Hong Kong for Chuck Leavell to see if he might be interested in playing some shows at the Royal Albert Hall." Yes, I would. Yes, I would. It was Eric and that experience. We did the 24 Nights record. We did the Rush music soundtrack during that time. And then this horrible tragedy happens with Eric and his son, who falls out of the window in this high rise in New York. It was just horrible, horrible. And Eric was going to take a year off and spend time with his son. But this happens. And so his manager calls up and says, "Eric needs to work. We don't need to let him be sitting around and take a year off, after this tragedy."
Yeah.
He's been talking to George Harrison, and he's convinced George to tour. "Do you want to come along, because it's going to be Eric and the band?" Okay, sure. Why not? George Harrison, a Beatle. Okay. Then the Stones are continuing to work, so in between Stones, in the Clapton years, and working with George on that last tour was a real. So one thing leads to another, keeping your eyes and ears open. As I said, you make your own luck.
Absolutely.
Right, and look for those opportunities.
But you have clearly done that, and you part of it too is your positive spirit and your concern for even the environment. And you've got 4 books that are fantastic, just regarding, nature at the highest level and the concern for the environmental world that we live in. Tell me a little about that.
Well, it's all my wife's fault. And by the way, Rosie and I have been married. We've celebrated our 46th anniversary on this tour.
Congrats, beautiful.
Get a lot of comments about that. "Man, divorce rate's really high in your line of work. How in the world have y'all stayed together? What's your secret?" And I say, well, it's really very simple, because marriage is like the old photographic film. It has to be developed in the dark. To the point when I first started dating Rose Lane, we got serious. Let's get married. Chuck, you need to come meet my family. Well, you haven't told me anything about your family. What about your family? And she said, well, as it happens, they're all farmers. And they live, at the time, you know, we were living in Macon. The family was 20 miles southeast of there in Twiggs County, Georgia.
Wow.
So, yeah, okay. Well, you know, I go all nervous. I'm long-haired hippie boy about to meet you know, dating the farmer's daughter, and now I got to meet the farmer, right? And the story, I got to tell this story. So later on, I found out that Mr. Al, that was Rose Lane's dad, got all the boys together and said, now look, Rose Lane is bringing this boy out here, and apparently they're getting pretty serious, and he's a little different. You know, he plays in a band, and it's not a country band, and it's one of them rock outfits up there in Macon that Rose Lane's been, you know, Rose Lane was working at the record company, you see.
Oh, that's we met.
That's
Okay.
how we met.
Yeah.
So, you know, and he said, but apparently they're kind of getting serious, so I don't want y'all making fun of him when he gets out here, you know. Thank you, Mr. They were so gracious to me, Dom. They opened their arms and welcomed me into that family, and so we began to spend some time, you know, weekends, holidays. I got this feeling of the love, the passion, the dedication of the land as farmers that they had. Now, they had row crops, they had cattle, there was forestry involved in the lands that the family owned. And so, fast forward 1981, Mr. Al has passed away, and Rose Lane's grandmother passes away, and she leaves Rose Lane about 1,000 acres of land.
Beautiful.
All of a sudden, we wake up, and this is our responsibility.
Yeah.
It's family land. Don't want to sell it. Want to keep it. But what do you do with it?
Yeah.
You know, what's our role in this thing now? I went to the library, checked out books. I went to government sources, which were quite good, by the way. Pamphlets and you know, on pecan trees, peach trees, or forestry, or row cropping. You know.
So you're doing the research of what possibly you can plant and use this land.
Exactly, and so wanting to keep my career as a musician, I realized row cropping, that's a lot of day-to-day, you know. We looked into pecans and peaches, well, you know, that's a lot of day-to-day too.
Yeah.
Livestock, a lot of day-to-day.
Yeah.
My brother-in-law at the breakfast table said, well, look, there's this 50-acre field down here, and if you're not gonna plant a crop on it, you might consider putting trees on it. Trees, wow. Long term, you know, I can be a musician, I can tour, I can do things. They're gonna sit there and grow.
Yeah.
And what about trees? You know, what good are they? You know, why do this?
Yeah.
Where does your instrument come from?
Absolutely.
Where does my instrument come from? It's given us both so much joy and a great career,
Yeah.
the resource of wood, you know, and so many other musical instruments. And then you start thinking about it. Well, what else do they do? Gives us materials to make books, magazines, newspapers, packaging products, all organic. They give us materials to build our homes and our schools and our churches and renovations and clean our air, clean our water.
Yeah, absolutely.
They sequester carbon in this day that we're all concerned about global warming and climate change.
Yeah.
We're sitting here in the recent days, what we've seen is happening in Brazil with the fires there at the Amazon.
Absolutely, totally.
It's the lungs of the planet, man.
Absolutely.
And we're losing it. So the point is, no more important resource that I can think of than trees and forests.
Beautiful.
And so I began this interest, and I started studying, and I was on tour with the Fabulous Thunderbirds, a little blues band from Texas.
Yeah, great band.
Ain't that tough enough? That was a great song. And I'm doing a correspondence course in the bus, in the back of the bus, or in hotel rooms, and about a year to get through this course, and I began to feel confident about managing forest land. So that's what happened, and it's still a passion of mine, and I still love learning about it, and it's gone into the advocacy. You mentioned the books.
Absolutely. Well, the books, I mean, you have the Mother Nature Network.
Yes, I'll try to condense this. My partner, who was a friend at the time, was this public relations genius. He was head of a big public relations firm out of Atlanta. We had become friends. He said, come to my office, I want to talk to you about something. Okay, I've got all these clients, Coca-Cola, AT&T, and they're all making significant changes in their behavior towards the environment. I have no problem knowing where to spend their budgets on getting this word out about these changes. And it's really important to find a space for these messages on the internet. But I've been scouring the internet and I can't find anything that I think is that significant. Chuck, what can you tell me? Well, there was Tree Hugger, which is still out there, and as a matter of fact, which we wound up buying. And there was Grist, another kind of environmental source. But the bottom line was they weren't getting any hits.
Yeah.
You know, they were getting minimal clicks. And so Joel, my partner, turns to me and said, well, what do you think? Is there an opportunity here? If you're willing to go in with me, I think I can get the funding and I'll resign my position and let's start a company.
How beautiful.
And that's what we did. The Mother Nature Network, the URL is mnn.com.
Beautiful.
And we're celebrating our 10th anniversary this year. And we now get 5 to 6 million hits a month.
Oh my gosh, how incredible.
And but the goal is to be the most accurate and informative source for environmental education, information, and so forth. So
Chuck,
hopefully we're providing a service.
You are doing that. Forever Green, The History and Hope of the American Forest, The Tree Farmer, a children's book,
Yeah.
and Growing a Better America, Smart, Strong, and Sustainable. This is about smart growth. This is really making a difference.
Well, I hope so, Tom, I do. You know, these are interesting times, as the Chinese saying goes. And there are so many challenges, especially with our environment. And the population continues to expand in this country and other countries. That's a lot of pressure on our environmental resources. And so it's prudent, I believe, for us to really think about these issues and to be careful how we make our decisions. And that's hopefully the goal of these books.
Well, I hope the message is heard loud and clear for them to do the research when they watch us here to go back and support it more. And this is exactly what we need more people to be involved with.
Well,
absolutely.
Well, thank you. I hope so.
In closing, Chuck, what would you say to this next generation? Here, these young musicians that have this desire to want to really go out there and be involved in the music industry. What would you say to them?
You know, it's so different than it was when you and I were coming up in so many ways. I mean, let's look at financially. You know, you used to actually make money when you sold records or sold CDs or cassettes or 8-tracks.
Yeah, whatever it was. Yeah.
But that's all changed with, you know, the Spotifys and the Pandoras and the downloading and the streaming.
Yeah.
The revenue source is much smaller. So if you want to get in this game and make a living, you have to figure out another way to do that. Unless you're one of the fortunate few, a Beyonce, a Jay-Z, or that's going to sell enough to where Taylor Swift to have enough revenue from streaming. But even in those cases, you know what they would have made in the days of
years ago would
LPs,
have been astronomical.
Exponentially more.
Yeah.
Live music is very, very important as a revenue source for people that want to follow this passion. Film, television, if you get your music in those idioms, then you can make a dime or two.
Yeah.
Education, you know, you're a great educator.
Thanks.
And you know the importance of that, I mean, in and of itself, but also as a revenue source.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
So, but look, what I said earlier about my dad, make your own luck. You know, learn how to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
Show up on time, practice, learn your instrument. You know, there's no magic answer. You got to put the work in. That's the main thing.
Boy, smart, strong, and sustainable. That's what you are, Chuck. You really are. You're all of that, and that really encompasses the effort that you are putting forward in this world that we need more Chuck Leavells.
Oh, well, bless
Absolutely.
you.
You are doing fantastic. You continue doing it. Thank you so much for your time, Chuck. You've done great.
What a joy. Appreciate you, man. Really do.
Thank you so much.
All right.